That's a supersonic aircraft, the Mach 1. Incidentally, when I say Mach 1, that's 750 miles an hour at sea level with conditions standard or conditions calm. So 750 miles an hour, the B-1B, that's a Mach 1 aircraft. The original, the B-1A, was a Mach 2 aircraft. At the end of the Cold War, it's been used as a conventional bomber carrying up to 84 500-pound bombs. Now, World War II B-29 could carry 40 bombs, so more than twice the load. These were retired in 2002. There are 18 of them stored here. You might notice that the nose cone is gone. That's a very popular part. Back when Jimmy Carter was president, he stopped this. He said, we don't have the money. When Ronald Reagan became president, they continued the B-1 bomber program. Okay, the next one on the left fills up your window is a C-5A Galaxy. That's our largest cargo plane. That's the 5th largest plane in the world. 81 of these A models were manufactured. They're all retired, and the B models are now being converted to an M model. Now you can put 2 Abrams tanks in there. You could carry 6 of these buses. And then up above, there's 73 passengers. Now the nose hinges up, as does the tail, so you can drive on and drive off to facilitate loading and unloading. Total capacity, 840,000 pounds. If you look to the right, there's a T-1A Sea Star. That's the Navy version of the Air Force's T-33 Shooting Star. That looks familiar. That's like the F-80, a trainer. That was our earliest jet. Looking to the left, you got the E-8C J-Stars. That's a 707 aircraft type, a tactical radar. They can talk to everybody in the theater, and of course its role is electronic countermeasure. It's called Eagle Eye, can emit a radar frequency, and that's used by all services to determine the proper weapon employment. Now that J-Star stands for Joint Service Tactical Radar System. No marking on it. That's a NASA C-9B. That was a civilian airliner, a 707. It was actually flown by various foreign countries, but for the last 10 years, NASA used it as a zero gravity trainer, so they could put astronauts in there and they could experience zero gravity. The next one off, he had a little problem with that. Wing came off. That bothered the pilot, bothered the passengers even more. So Lockheed stopped flying that. The Navy picked it up and solved the problem. It was intense vibration of the wing on the engine. It's a turboprop powered, very good for tracking device. If you look to the back of that, and we'll see a better view of it, there's a pod that sticks out. That's called the magnetic anomaly detector, and that can track electronics down 600 feet, anything electronic 600 feet under the ocean. Now I want you to adjust your glasses real well here, because we're going to look at the F-117 Nighthawk. That's a stealth fighter. Notice it to the right? Okay, if you can see it, you have better glasses than me. The tires in the ladder are not stealthy. That's an aircraft that's now retired, and they're in the hangars at Tonopah Test Air Range at Air Force Base in Nevada, where they began their existence. They're no longer secret. However, their composite skin is sensitive to the sun. 64 of them were built, and they're stored up there. Incidentally, they are the measuring stick to evaluate radar detection of the current F-22 and the F-35 future generation aircraft. Next one is an F-4C Phantom. That's kind of the workhorse of the Air Force and the Navy. This one fires only missiles, no guns. And then to the left, you have a T-43 Gator. That's a modified 737 Boeing used by the Air Force to train navigators. Get it? The Gator, the navigators, for over 37 years. Could actually have 12 students in there. It's a McDonnell DC-9 civilian airliner used by the Navy for transport and logistical support. They purchased 16 of those in the 80s, and among other things, they used them to transport reservists to various training sites. The Air Force had one that had it was called the C-9 Nightingale. To the left, we have an EC. EC meaning a cargo plane, but electronic cargo. Electronic jammer under the nose. And then back over to the right, the F-15 Eagle. This is a fighter bomber, 2 people in the cockpit. That's a Mach 2 aircraft. To the left, remember I said there's a variety of C-130s? This is an LC-130. L standing for cold weather. This one was equipped with skis to operate on ice and snow. Its primary mission was support in Antarctica. It's operated by a New York Air National Guard flying unit. There's also one in Christchurch, New Zealand. That's 130. This is a DC-130. And the C-130, as I said, the oldest aircraft in our inventory. This one was devised to operate as a drone carrier director. You'll note it had large pylons that hung down between the engines and the outboard outer engine, making it possible to carry 4 drone aircraft. This is just a plain C-130E. It's special because it received an honorary Purple Heart. This aircraft was taking off in Vietnam. The number 3 engine was knocked out. It landed, they replaced it. It continued to fly, but when it landed at the next place, they said it looked like Swiss cheese. It had so many holes in it. So they decided that it should have a Purple Heart. As you know, only people get Purple Hearts, but this particular one got one. Incidentally, it continued through Desert Storm and retired in 2008 after 44 years of service. Built in North Ireland, it's a Sherpa, C-23, small military transport. Again, a short takeoff and landing. It was used by the Army National Guard until 2014. I understand it's now used in Afghanistan, and the Coast Guard and Forest Service use this. That plane to the left with the huge engines, that's a prototype. That's a Boeing YC-14. It was designed for a short takeoff and landing and as a replacement for the C-130. They thought maybe it could do a better job than the 130. But due to budget constraints, it never went anywhere. Actually, there are 2 of them, one here and one sitting behind one of our hangars over at Pima. If you look to the right of that plane back there, you'll see a plane with 03 on it. That's a C-130. It actually was under the ice for 17 years. All you could see was the tail and the nose of that. And we call it the Phoenix because it rose from the ashes. The Navy did decide to thaw it out, take it above, and they did fly it. And that one did spend 17 years under the ice. You left the plane with the strange propeller blades. That's the E-2C Hawkeye. That's a carrier-capable tactical airborne early warning system. And what that would do, a couple of functions. Early warning as to other aircraft coming in, but it's also kind of like the controller of your local airport. You have air control. Remember, there's all kinds of planes flying around that carrier, and that's what the AWACS, one of the functions of it is to control the carrier battle group aircraft, because you've got 60 to 70 aircraft plus support aircraft. This is the C-12B Huron. That looks pretty much like a Beechcraft Super King Air corporate airliner and used for senior officials, cargo, state and governmental agencies and so forth. The left, the C-1. I have a little personal experience with that. It shows something that's kind of interesting. That's a carrier on-board delivery. Being an Army guy, I didn't fly on many of the Navy aircraft, but I had a chance to take a group of people out to witness the carrier qualifications, the takeoff and landings at a carrier. They went to leave and they said, how are we going to get off this thing? They said, well, you're going off on a cod. So it takes about a dozen people. You sit in there backwards because the great amount of force when you land is, your back is protected. So the fellow told us, he said, now if you're going to have eyeglasses on, make sure you put them in your pocket. Well, a number of people didn't, and I was sitting in the back seat, and I was a receptacle for a number of pairs of eyeglasses, because when you go off on that catapult, you go from 0 to about 130 knots in 2 seconds. So it's kind of interesting. That's the way the planes are shot off the carrier. To the left, the C-130s. I said before, these are in type 1000 storage, inviolate. They may not be touched. No parts removed without the approval of the Air Force or naval authorities. Of AMARC's 4,000 aircraft, about 200 of these are type 1000 storage. As I mentioned, there are 40 different models. On the right, you see a number of canisters with engines. There's between 6,000 and 7,000 engines. Some of those, the larger ones with the spray lat, are the C5 engines. The engines have a lightweight oil run through their system, and then oxygen will be purged out with the canisters with nitrogen to help engine preservation. Of course, once these engines are removed, they again belong to the engine manager. They have F-111s, F-15s, what have you. Those, there were open canisters back there. That means that the precious metal has been removed and they can be recycled. Off to the right, you're going to see some F-16 Fighting Falcons. There's about 500 of these that we have, followed by the F-4 and the T-39 in terms of numbers. These F-16 are C&D models, and they will be set aside for reactivation for the full-scale aerial target program, where a plane will fly a couple of hundred hours, and then upon its demise, it's done. To the left, people, the spraylet. I didn't talk too much about the spraylet. Those F-8s are sitting there in various phases. This is the place where they take care of the spraylet. What it is, they spray a coating of black on any area of the aircraft where air could get in. And then what they do is they put 2 white coats on that. And the white coats diffuse the heat. And as a result, you can keep the temperature inside the cockpit probably within 10 to 15 degrees of the ambient temperature. Now, all planes, when they come in, they go to the wash rack. And I mentioned that early on. They go to the flush farm. And that's what you see up here on the right. You see the P3 sitting there. There's an F-16 and F-18. Those have either come in or are about to leave, but they're washed when they come in and they're washed before they leave. We're going to turn right up here, but there's 2 aircraft that are sitting on the left, and those are drone aircraft. The 106s were used before the F-4s, but then the F-4s were the most prevalent. They still a number of the F-4s here for parts, but the F-16s are now used. And what they do, they'll take that aircraft. It takes usually about 2 months to have it ready, and what they will do is fly it at Mach 1.6, 1.8. Once it passes those tests, they fly it to Cecil Field in Florida, where the Boeing company will outfit it so it can be remotely controlled to take off, to fly, and to land. This big hangar to the right is interesting. This is relatively new. This was opened up just a short time ago. It's a 77,000 square foot hangar, $25 million. It's hot in the summertime here. You can put 2 C-130s. You can put a couple of KC-135s or P-3s in there to work. There's a little shelter to the right. A lot of times what they'll do, they'll put the plane in there. That's where they'll take the armament off of it. Those are the same types of shelters that the planes, the ready planes over on the hot runway, the Davis-Monthan are sheltered in. To the right, you're going to see a road that runs down, and this is the taxiway. If you look directly to the right, that taxiway goes over to Davis-Monthan. Now, 99% of the planes that come in here are flown in to Davis-Monthan. They come to the flush farm and then further distribution. Okay, you got some B-1Bs sitting over there, possibly to be converted. Here's some various missiles. And behind them, there's a number of aircraft that are available for a civic group, for a VFW, American Legion. There's 2 caveats. If you want to get those, you have to come and get them, and number 2, you have to refinish it to its original operating condition, to the point of how it looks for display. Now we're crossing over Kolb Road. Remember I said everything on this side of Kolb Road does not fly. The first aircraft, these are Reclamation insurance type. These are type 2000. Same level of preservation as 1000, except parts can be removed. 4,000 are excess to the needs of service. You could take anything off. AMARC last year was about $216 million in parts sales. Remember, their mission is to supply parts worldwide. Once we get past this next aircraft here, Eric's going to stop, and I want to point out something kind of interesting. Remember I talked about the B-57 Canberra? The one sitting there with the stands under the wing, that's a WB. That plane was used prior to, for high flights, for observation, for aerial photography, but the wingspan of that is 122 feet. Do you know what the length of Wilbur and Orville Wright's first flight was? 120 feet. Does that kind of put that in proper perspective? Okay, a number of trainers here. You'll notice one of the problems with the trainers, the biggest problem is they knock the nose wheel off. So you see the nose wheel is off. It's been replaced by many of these. In fiscal 13, AMARC actually distributed over 10,000 parts, an original value of $341 million. And the way they operate on these planes, it's a negative inventory. plane comes in with the idea it has everything on it. So if they need parts and they take it off of a particular tail number and it's a negative inventory, they know what exactly is left on that. Here you have a number of F4s. And then on the right, we've got some of the B1s. There's 18 of them here. Remember, you cannot take the engine or the cockpit off of these. Some more F4s, and these are all here for parts. A variety of planes. You see C-130s back here. Again, these will not fly again. And you got a number of C-5s. These were from the Memphis Air Guard wing. All these planes are here for parts. And you'll see people out working on them, coming out, taking the parts off. And I'll show you where the procurement and distribution takes place in a few moments. Again, some more of the Jolly Green Giants up here, some other helicopters. But what's interesting is we get past that, you look off to the right, and the START treaty, as a result of the START treaty, we had to do away with a number of our aircraft. Under START 1, we had to shred the B-52Gs. They were nuclear capable delivery. Under START 2, we had to make 2 cuts. And under START 3, if you look off to the right, you'll see some B-52s sitting over there. What they finally agreed that they had to do was to come up about 30 feet from the tail, take like a skill saw, cut all the way around the tail, lift it up, and set it off on a stand at an angle, so the Russians could verify that that plane is not going to fly again. Now, directly ahead of us, Eric's going to turn and stop for just a second because there's a lot of boxes and so forth out there. And out there, people, we have more than 700,000 items of tooling, special equipment, dies, forms, and so forth to build aircraft. There's some 300,000 parts out there. Now, we could build a B-1B, a B-52, a B-2, an A-10, a C-5, a C-130, FA-18. So in the event we ever had to build those aircraft again, you don't have to reinvent the tools, the dies, and the jigs. And I understand the C-17 just came here. Eric, pull ahead a little bit. And one thing is you see a row of KC-135 sitting here, but pull ahead just a little bit so we can look back at about 4 o'clock, and you'll see a plane over there, a little further yet. You'll see a plane with a dome. And you've heard of AWACS planes? See that dome over there? Okay, that's a dome. That's what we used in a theater, an AWACS plane. Again, early warning or to control the aircraft, just like you'd have control at your local airport back home. And these are all KC-135s. You see some civilian airliners on the right. The Navy purchased these a number of years ago when these 707s were going out of business because they wanted the engines. They took them off and they put them, if you'll notice the small engines of the KC-135s, these are a little larger engines. They may or may not have been used on these, but the engines have been modified a number of times on the KC-135. Now the KC-135, K meaning a tanker, and I'll talk more about their role as aerial in-flight refueling. Off to the right, you'll see some P3s. Notice that magnetic anomaly detector on the back of these, on those Navy aircraft. And again, they can detect anything down to 600 feet under the surface. And those shelters over there are used, the Navy used those as far as working on planes in the summer. And off to the right, we got some more E-2C Hawkeyes. Remember, they were the ones that could control the aircraft on the carrier. You'll see some of the domes sitting here, but that's the E-2C Hawkeye. Again, there are just more planes here, 4 parts. If you happen to drive on the other side, on the far side of the border on Irvington Road, you can take a look at these planes. And there's only one more that I'm going to talk about up here. You've all heard of the Harrier jump jet that the British used for a long time. Well, they don't use it anymore, but we bought all that they had because the Marines still use the Harrier jump jet. And we have one of them up on the right here. Notice the plane with the red tail? That's not it, it's the next one. And that's the plane that could take off and land vertically. It could take off from an aircraft carrier and then land. And the Marines still use that aircraft. Now as we leave this side where all the planes, where all the parts are, we're going to cross over Cove again. And on the right, we have what's known as the Disposal Services Facility. It's a Defense Regional Marketing Office. And everything that is in there is for sale. Now a lot of these things are sold by bids, an auction, a fixed price, what have you. You cannot buy an entire Humvee. You can buy the parts from the Humvee. They used to do the disposal over on this corner, but now it's done in another area where they actually shred planes. I had one of the early groups that I had, a young man said he went online and he found out they had a seat ejection system anywhere from $500 to $5,000. Now what would you use with a seat ejection system? I always like to say, other than maybe you had a limited term employee and you wanted to give them a send-off if you didn't hire him or something like that. But you'll see generators in here, air conditioners. Every military installation has one of these, but this is a regional one. This is a pretty good sized one. And of course I said sealed bids and what have you. The drone program, just to say a little more about the drone program. It's kind of interesting. Those planes are taken, they're flown, the F-16s that are being used now are flown for probably about 200 hours. And after about 200 hours, their usefulness is waning. So what they will do is they'll actually shoot them down. They'll take them with live ammunition. They'll take them over the Gulf of Mexico or out to Holloman Air Force Base if they want to test some missiles and actually shoot the aircraft down. So, like I said, there are plenty of them here. There are nearly 500 of them here that are still in use, and these are the older B and C models. As we turn left, we're going to take a look at kind of the inner workings. Oh, excuse me. Stop just a little bit ahead, Eric, so they can see behind that water tower. There's another C-130. That is an AC. That's an attack cargo plane. That plane carries 20 millimeter cannon. It also has a 105 millimeter howitzer cannon that's fired from it. That has quite a bit of firepower. That's an AC-130, an attack cargo. Again, on the left, the wash rack where all planes coming or going will enter. Up on the right, we're going to see that building that is the brick building. That's for the preservation and storage of environmentally sensitive areas. And on the left, the first building you're going to see is the A-Mark packaging and crating facility, the wood mill. They can package and ship any part, any size, engines, wings, sensors, what have you. And the next building on the left is actually the parts reclamation building. That's where we receive the orders, procurement, ultimate shipping instructions. And behind that you'll see a large hangar, and it runs 900 feet in length. And one part of it's for aircraft preservation and re-preservation, certain stages of spray latting. The center part supports aircraft flyaways like the C-130 regeneration, and the other for A-10 services. Look to the left, and you'll see parts here that are in the process of being shipped out. There are engine containers and a host of things. Many times you'll see civilian trucks in here ready to pick these up. Off to the right, the KC-135s, a beautiful view of the Santa Catalina Mountains. But these KC-135s are interesting. Notice they have on the back, they have a little thing that drops down, and it's kind of like a V. And what it does, that's what the aircraft that's being refueled will come up, and they'll hook that in. Usually like on the F-16, it's right behind the cockpit. And they can refuel up to 10,000 pounds per minute. The aircraft carries about 200,000 pounds. If you want to know how many gallons that is, divide it by 7. But they can refuel at 30,000 feet at 400 miles an hour. A friend of mine took his group from Madison, Wisconsin over to Kuwait, and had to refuel 6 times over the Atlantic because they only carry about 10,000 pounds, and of course that doesn't last very long. Some Hueys on the right, more KC-135s. On the left, a lot of the trainers. You'll see some UH-1s, some H-57s. Number of the Beechcraft type. And some Sherpas up here on the left. We were told these Sherpas were going to the Forest Service after they put numbers on them, but they're still here, so evidently they haven't taken. These are the Sherpas, the boxy ones up on the left. The F-4 was once the most numerous aircraft with more than the 600, as I said, in storage. Today the F-16 is the most numerous. Okay, once we leave here, please silence your cameras or take your cameras off of use. Pictures are not allowed here. I hope you got a number of good pictures.